Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today we're going to continue our pandemic projects. This time we're taking on a new reel, just because I want to see what's inside of it. It seems very smooth, nice operator, and this one came to me in a job lot from a distributor that was looking to sell some new surplus reels, and I have never seen one of these apart, so I figured we'd all learn from that one. And hopefully we'll understand a little bit more about it. This is the Abu Garcia Red Max 30. It's a nice reel. It's smooth. It's the 30 size reel. So the 30 size reel holds approximately 175 yards of 8-pound test. It's rated for 6, 8, and 10 pounds. So we're talking about inshore rivers, lakes, and the like. And casting reel, very nice, very smooth reel, and the bail is reminiscent of a Penn Fierce. That would kind of make sense. Abu and Penn are owned by the same company, Pure Fishing. But at any rate, we're going to take it apart and we're going to learn from it in terms of what it is. If you have one of these, you'll see how to service it, and if you are thinking of buying one of these, if you see it around, then you'll understand what it is that's inside it, what makes it work, and how to go from there. So we're going to start by taking off the exterior parts. That includes removing the spool. In this case, we take the drag tensioner knob off, and we take the spool off, and we'll come back to that spool at the end to look at the drag washers inside, make sure that we understand what they are. Next up, then, we can take that series of spool washers off. There's a couple of them on there, the little plastics. Those plastics adjust the height of the line travel. In this case, there's 3 plastic ones on there, and there's no line, so I don't know if this is balanced properly or not, because it's a new reel. But if you found that your reel was gathering up to the top, not even, but more so up to the top than the bottom, you would take one of those washers off. Maybe 2 washers off, it all depends. Okay, I'm going to take off the handle now, and this should have a handle screw. We'll see. Yep, we have a handle screw. So that, you can tell the handle screws when you're turning your handle. If this button's moving, it's got a handle screw. And most of the time, if it's not moving, it doesn't, but every now and then somebody hides a screw underneath a stationary button, so just pay attention. Once I take that off, I'm just going to put that screw right back into the handle so I don't lose it. I'm going to put that into my parts tray, which is hiding in the back here. It's nothing more than the bottom of a milk jug, and that serves to collect all the parts that I take off of the reel, and then when I go to reinstall the reel, I know where to look for them. Now normally I would tell you to grab a schematic, but I don't have one for this reel, so pay attention, I guess, is one of the words. But the other thing is to take pictures along the way, because if you lose your sequence when you go to reinstall, you can always go back to your pictures and say, oh, that's where that piece came from, or I see that the orientation of a part is this way, not that way. All right, we have a bump guard on here. There's a stud here and no apparent screws. So it's a head scratcher. How do you get this thing attached? Well, chances are it's hiding under one of these screws, and since this is the closest one, and this one looks like it's got a stud coming through, my guess is that there's a little loop from this inside the case that screw is going through. So let's see if that's how this works. Pull that screw out, put that into the case, and yep, we got something coming out here. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so there you go. So you have a little tab inside that's riding in through the slot here, and that case screw is holding it on. Important to do that because you've got a little case screw hiding underneath as well. And this bump guard protects the core body from being fractured if you bang something like the side rail of a boat, or a railing on a pier, or if you drop it, it won't fracture the case. So that's why those bump guards are there. All right, the 2 black screws appear to be the same size. I'm checking them as I take that out. I know that this one's different already, just visually. This one is a silver one with a smaller head. And I don't think I have it. I think I need to use a micro screwdriver here. That's okay, I have one nearby. It's always good to keep the tools kind of within reaching length. That way you can grab the pieces and make sure that you still maintain control of the reel and so on. As I look up here, this side plate is not going to come out before the rotor gets removed. So now I'm just going to hold that side plate firm, take the rotor off. There's a set screw here. That's for the hold that nut in place so that that nut doesn't spin and make the rotor come loose. That goes into my parts tray. And then the rotor nut is a 10mm nut. And if you turn it to the right and in the traditional counterclockwise method, and you find that it's just tightening or not moving, go to the left. That would be a reverse thread. And in this case, that's exactly what this is. If you turn it clockwise, it will come off as opposed to tightening. With that, then you should be able to remove the rotor by walking it up. And here's the look into what we have. We have a anti-reverse override. We have a collar for the pinion gear. I imagine this is a reverse clutch. I didn't take the time to find out what we got there. But what I do see is we have an additional case screw under the rotor. So that's another reason why you need to pay attention to this. If you, for some reason, decided, okay, I got the 3 of these out, and you start yanking and pulling and so on, you might break the case because there's another screw up here. And hopefully that's the same as the small one below. I'm going to compare that right now. If it was a different size, I would make a note, but those two are the same size. So top and bottom are the same size, side to side are the same size with black heads. Okay, now we should be able to remove this. Getting a little bit of movement. Just want to walk it out. And this is not atypical of a new reel. There's some grease, but not a lot of grease, and a lot of it is settled. So what happens is these reels a lot of times, particularly when they're in a distributor lot like I bought them, they're just laying around in a warehouse for a while, and that grease tends to be affected by gravity. Gravity tends to just put it to the lowest point, and if it's a hot warehouse, a lot of times it'll start to evaporate the greases in it. So as part of this exercise then, we're going to go ahead and we're going to just re-lube this. I'm going to put some more oil onto that side bearing. That's bearing number 1. It says we have 4 bearings. Then I'm going to rotate this reel down so I can remove the, let's see if we can get the main gear out without removing the axle shaft. We can. This is bearing number 2 on this side. And this is nice technology for the, I'm not sure what the price of the reel is, but we have a double here. Let me take that axle shaft out so I can show you. But we have a double ringed cross-wind transfer gear that you don't see on a lot of reels. Again, I don't know what the pricing is on this reel. I probably should have done my homework before. But you'll notice that we have the cross-wind gear in the back here, off of the main gear. That's typical of a spinning reel kind of a combination. But most of the time, that cross-wind gear, or drive gear, will go right to the cross-wind gear, which is here. In this case, we have an intermediary gear that's transferring that. So that back of the main gear is driving the big portion of that, and the smaller gear is driving the cross-wind gear. Pretty neat kind of a combination. Well, this reel's clean and it's new, as I mentioned. I'm not going to go take it all apart. I am going to oil bearing number 2. And then what I'm going to do is, you can see that the grease has pretty much come off, at least the pinion gear. So I'm going to go ahead and put some more grease back onto the pinion gear. Now, normally I will tell you to check the teeth on these gears, but I know this is an unused reel, so you don't need to spend a lot of time doing that. But if you have opened one up that's been used, please check the teeth on these gears. There's a good chance that they may get worn or broken or the like. So I'm just going to take the surplus grease that's out of the main gear here, and this is just settled. This is from sitting in a warehouse or in the packaging or whatever it was. It's going to do absolutely no good on the face there. But I want to get grease back into the teeth, which is how this was originally lubricated. And I'm also going to get some grease into the teeth that drive that crosswind gear that we were talking about there. Okay, with that done then, I can go ahead and do two things. I can move this stud in the case down to the bottom because we're going to put that crosswind back in, and we can reestablish that, that axle shaft. If you were working on this reel, this is bearing 3, which is the top bearing for the pinion, and I guess bearing 4 is going to be the anti-reverse, because this has got instant anti-reverse, so that that anti-reverse collar is often referred to as a bearing. That would be bearing number 4 in the reel. So it's a nice case setup. It's a lightweight case, typical, I believe it's called casting kind of metals. Some people call it pot metal and so on, but it's not a brass or any of the higher end type of real metals. It's a cast piece or a molded piece. I'm not quite sure how they make them, but regardless. And then what you want to do, there's a little tab on that crosswind block. You want to get that under the carrier here, and then you want to make sure this is sort of lined up with that. And because that rides on that that piece, you can get some grease onto that side of the case there as well. Now we can just wipe off the axle shaft. Put a little bit of grease on the axle shaft. Don't put a lot on. If you put a lot on, all it's going to do is congregate up here on the top, and it's just going to be held there with no apparent usage. Put the axle shaft in, line that hole. If it's tough to see, there's the hole in the axle shaft and the hole in the crosswind block. Line them up. And go ahead and grab the little offset screw that goes back in there. There it is. Dangerous leaving them on the table. I don't normally do that, but unfortunately I did it there. So just be aware. And also I'm looking at the table, and one of the little tension or spacer washers from the main gear came out. That's where a schematic would be helpful. You got 2 of these here. Those take up slack in the positioning of the gears, and they help to eliminate any kind of rattle or shake that goes on. And if I didn't know they belonged there, then we would be in trouble if we were doing that. Okay, the back of the main gear is greased, the pinion gear is greased, the crosswind blocks are greased, the bearings are oiled. We can go ahead and put this back in. I'm just going to hold my finger on it for a moment just to make sure everything is turning properly, that it's seated correctly, which it is. So we can go ahead and put this back together then. We've oiled the bearing on this side. We have our spacer washers on the main gear. Let's go ahead and just put that back in. That's a nice tight seal. We noted that the 2 black ones come to the sides here. So let's go ahead and put them in. And I like to do this in an alternating pattern. I don't like to go circular on these. I like to go across the body. That way it kind of maintains equal tension or torque on the plastic parts. And I think that screw is just reminding me there that we've got to put the bump guard on. So I'm going to put the other 2 in before I put that screw on there. Sometimes they help you yourself. Fell out and made me pay attention. Alright, so the 2 go up top, 1 on the bottom, 1 on the top. Those are the silver ones. Now this bump guard has that little wing on it there, so we want to get that up and in. And I think this one just pushes up and over. There we go. Now we can put that black screw into the other hole. And the bottom of the case is complete then. So next up would be the rotor. Now, of course, if you had a problem with your anti-reverse, if you had this reel a while, you were doing a tune-up, you can take the bearing pinion assembly out by removing these two screws, pulling up on this. Remove that spring so that you can get to the collar for the anti-reverse, and you can service it that way. This being a new reel doesn't need that attention. Also, I'm going to put a drop of oil into the lever here. Now, that's really not much of a moving part there. I'm going to put the drop of grease onto, or a drop of oil rather, into the two cracks on the side of the bail and also onto the line roller. And now we can go ahead and put that bail back on, or that rotor assembly back on with the bail. Remember, this came off in a clockwise direction, so it goes on in a counterclockwise direction. It's what's called reverse thread. And then we can tighten that. Many times as you do it, it's still odd to turn it left to tighten. Give it a spin to make sure that it's working nice. And it certainly is working nice. We have the hole there for the hold down screw, so let's go ahead and put that hold down screw back in there. And then we'll go up top to that assembly for the drag, and we'll just see what's going on there. I guess we can put the handle in at this point. Handle was one of the first things I took off, so let's go ahead and put that back on. Simply thread the shaft through the main gear to do that. Eventually that will pull the handle in so that it's tight. There you go. Actually feels even a little bit better there. I'd like to attribute that to just putting some more grease in there. We have a ring clip inside of a groove here. I'm going to remove that. I use a little pick, but you could use a little screwdriver or anything else for that matter. Let's see what we have in here. We have felt washers in here. So this is kind of important that I did this one. A lot of folks say, why do you even take a new reel apart? It's new. Well, here's an example of that. This one's been sitting in a warehouse for a while now, and these felt washers are dry. They shouldn't be. If they dry, they become vulnerable to tearing, and one of the things you can do is simply remove that ring. You want to saturate felt washers with oil. That keeps them flexible, and it prevents tearing. Next up is a keyed washer. It's a rectangular kind of a center, round. Oh, this setup has keyed washers and eared washers. So we're going to put the second felt washer in now. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to make sure it's oiled. And then we're going to put what's called the eared washer in. It has a round circle, but it has two studs sitting out of each end, kind of look like ears. They ride in a slot inside the spool. I'm going to take that last felt washer now. Now, of course, this is a new reel. If it wasn't a new reel, you would look at the washers, you would remove any dirt, and make sure that it's nice and clean before you put them back in. By its nature, a top drag fishing reel takes the brunt of the water. As you're winding that line in, the water's coming with it, and it's hitting that top where the drag adjuster button is, and a lot of it gets onto the drags. So as part of your service, you want to make sure that you keep it clean, and always check the channels inside there, and make sure that that you have them properly cleaned up before you go back fishing again. All right, I'm going to seat the bottom of this into the groove. Then I'm going to work the one side in. Then I'm going to work the other side in. Then I'm going to make sure that it's in the groove. This one's a little bit below. All right, so there's your spool service. Just put that back on. Next step then is that rotor, click rotor. So on the bottom of, oops, I did it the wrong way. How do you like that? Click rotor goes underneath the spool. Then we had the 3 shim washers, and again, if you're spooling to one side, if you have too much line going up top, take one of these out, and you may have to take 2 of them out. But some manufacturers like Shimano and that will give you extras. They'll put what they believe is the recommended piece in there, and then they give you extras to control that. In this case, they put the 3 right on here, and you may have to take 1 down. That little silver piece in there with the little stud on it is going to interlock with this click rotor, and that noise it's making is when it's letting line out. So if you have your drag loose, sliding a fish, and you hear that noise, it means that the line is spooling out. Okay, now we'll tighten down the drag washer. Yep, it's tight. Give it a final spin. So there you have it. This is the Abu Garcia Red Max 30 and 4-ball bearing reel, which is plenty. It's got a 5-to-1 gear ratio. It's a medium lined kind of a reel. I like it. I hope you've enjoyed seeing it being taken apart and how to service it if you have one, and what it's made of if you're thinking of buying one. So I wish you well. If you're a first responder, I want to take this moment to thank you for all it is that you're doing to help us stay well and to get well during the pandemic if we're suffering from this. And if you have any comments, please leave them in the comment block. And if you want to see more of these, please subscribe. And finally, if you have a reel that needs service and you're not up to doing it yourself, then please contact me on the business card for information on service and repairs. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.